This session is called Search Friendly Design, and you're going to be learning about building your site on a search engine friendly foundation by learning some of the underlying technical code best practices for making your site SEO friendly. So you've learned about this in some of our other videos, but it's definitely worth repeating as it's one of the core reasons why you need a search friendly design, and that's of course accessibility. Keeping things simple and most importantly, accessible. So we need to make sure that our content is easy to read and easy to understand for the search engine robots. So when a bot comes to your site and it has a look at the entire page of code and it has to find the content that it needs to read and rank. So it's going to be looking through your navigation and your images and all the different things on your site, and it has to determine which part of it is the content. So when a site has poor code quality, it makes that process very, very difficult and sometimes impossible for the search engines to figure out what on the page is the content that they should be indexing. So today you're going to learn some of the ways that you can make sure your site's code is clean and very easy to read, and that way it won't cause any trouble for you when the search engines come by and try to look at your content, and it'll keep you ranking well. So at their core, websites are built using very basic HTML that is very simple, clean, and it is very easy for search engines to understand. So as time has moved on, a lot of the code that websites were built from has changed a little bit, and some new features have been added, and that's all good and fine. But many of these features are great for users, and they look great, and they give developers a lot of room for functionality. But many of these things can completely ruin a site's chance of ranking well in search engines because bots cannot understand all these new features. So keeping it simple and keeping it easy to understand is really the core thing that I want you to take away here. So the first thing I want to look at is something called CSS tableless design. So what CSS does is it removes the layout and the design from the HTML file. The HTML file references a separate cascading style sheet, which is what CSS stands for. And what this does is it allows your HTML file to be much, much smaller, load much, much faster. And what this does is when the bot comes to your site, it has less to do. It doesn't have to sift through all the design stuff, all the layout. It simply sees the content. And I have an example here on your screen of the difference between the two. You've got one that's the HTML that contains all the layout and all the design and all that stuff, and it's a much larger file size. So the bot's going to have to download a lot more data and sift through a lot more data to find the important content. Now, the other option is having a very, very clean, small HTML file that just includes content and then a separate file that has all the layout and design information. This tableless design is much, much more efficient and much more search engine friendly. So let's look at a few other things that can cause your website to not be very search engine friendly and that you should be avoiding. The first of which is JavaScript. So search engine bots cannot execute scripts. So any content, meaning text content or links, cannot be seen if they are generated by JavaScript. So when your browser renders a page, if a piece of JavaScript has to execute in order for links to be visible to the user, the bot will not see that. And a very common mistake is to put content inside of a piece of JavaScript so that it can have some sort of animation or other type of functionality. You see these content sliders and certain things, and those look really cool, but oftentimes if they're not coded properly, the JavaScript will actually stop the search engines from being able to see them. So always make sure that you have a certain clean level of HTML, and you can still run JavaScript, but make sure that that HTML is visible without the JavaScript running. Next up is images. Search engine bots cannot see images. So if you have any text that's rendered inside of a JPEG or GIF or PNG or any other image type, they cannot read what's ever in there. They can't see the image. The good news is there's the image alt tag, and that's the alt text, or sometimes just called the description, that you can use to tell the search engines what that picture is of. So if you do have a picture, be sure to use the image alt text So another thing to look out for are frames. Search engine bots cannot see inside frames. If you have a main page and then you have some sort of content that's pulled inside of a frame, search engines are not going to be able to see that. What they will do is sometimes they'll find the content inside the frame, but it will be treated as a completely separate page, meaning they will count the page with the frame as one page and the content of the frame as a second page. So you're going to have a little issue there. So definitely avoid using frames. And this goes for both regular traditional frames and something called iframes. Both of them are going to cause that same issue. So Flash is another thing that search engine bots cannot see. They cannot follow links. They can't read the content, anything like that. There has been some advances in the recent years allowing search engines to see a little bit inside a Flash file, but it's still a gamble. I'd still play it safe and make sure that your content is not inside of a Flash movie so that it will be visible to search engines. If you do have anything inside of Flash, make sure that it's irrelevant to your SEO goals and your ranking goals, and it's just an animation, something like that. But keep your text content and the overall navigation of your site outside of Flash. So I wanted to talk about WordPress really quick here. WordPress is a fantastic content management system. It's one that I recommend and use all the time. And the content management system you use is very important, but be aware of the theme that you're using. So while WordPress controls the overall content management, the theme is what's actually rendering the HTML. So anytime you're on WordPress, you want to make sure that you're using a very, very high quality theme. There's a lot of themes out there for sale and they can be very cheap. Oftentimes those can be pretty poor code quality and you're going to want to stay away from those. Then there's also some really high quality theme frameworks that you can use, that if you're going to hire a developer, you can have them build your site on top of a theme framework. Two of the most popular ones are one called Thesis and Genesis by StudioPress. Those are both incredibly search engine optimized. So if you're going to hire somebody to build you a WordPress theme, I would recommend having them build it on top of a theme framework. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at a site, and we're going to look at the code, and I'm going to give you an example of an easy to read site and why it's easy to read. So here is the Infinite Skills website. And as you can see, there's a lot of layout going on. There's a lot of links. There's a lot of navigation and content and pictures. There's text content spread amongst 3 different columns. So there's a lot of different layout going on here. Now, if this was done in a traditional HTML table type design, it would be very difficult for Google to move around and figure out which one of these tables it should be reading and what this web page is all about. However, this has been done in CSS, so that's tableless. Now I want you to see what it looks like when we remove the CSS and we just see the HTML. Now to do this, I'm going to use a plugin that you've learned about in one of our other videos called Web Developer. And Web Developer has a really cool feature where you can click CSS, disable styles, all styles. Now when I do this, it's going to remove all of the CSS styling, all the layout, all the design, all that stuff, and just be left with the HTML. So as you can see, all the layout is gone, and it's a very simple top-down layout. So as Google reads this, the images won't be seen by Google, but you can see that it's very easy to see all of these text links that are very easy for Google to follow. Keep scrolling down, some more text links, again, makes it real easy for Google to find all the content on this site. Then you can see a lot of the text content here, which it's just plain text, which is perfect, very, very easy for Google to see. Here's a list, which is very easy as well. More text content, more links. So this is what you want to be looking for when you remove the CSS file, that it's just a very simple, top-down, easy to read piece of text. I'm going to go ahead and re-enable the CSS, and you'll see that bare HTML file turns into this wonderfully designed site. That's how powerful CSS is. So this is what I mean by CSS tableless design. Okay, so in conclusion, the search-friendly design is essential to getting indexed and getting ranked well. As you've learned in this video, there's a lot of things that can make a bot's job really difficult. Flash, images, JavaScript, and having a really complicated design can make it really difficult for search engines to get the content it needs from you. So definitely make sure that you're using a very clean and simple HTML, CSS design. If you're running on WordPress, definitely look at the more higher end theme frameworks like Thesis and Genesis, and make sure that it's going to be good and easy for Google to find your content so that you can get ranked well.